All right, my name is Nick B, and let's get into this week's futures overview. So, starting with the Forex economic calendar, Monday's going to be quiet. Tuesday at 1, we have the 10-year bond auction. Wednesday at 8:30 a.m. EST, we have CPI. At 2 p.m., we have FOMC. 2:30 FOMC press conference. Powell's probably going to speak. Thursday, 8:30, we have core PPI and unemployment claims. Yellen, not that important. 30-year bond auction at 1 on Thursday as well. And then Friday we have the consumer sentiment consumer sentiment report at 10 a.m. Okay. With that said, we know there's going to be some action this week, and the best thing we can do now is just identify what's been happening, what can we see from here. So, as always, let's pull this up to the 2-year daily. Let me clear it up. All right. This is bullish. Can't deny it, right? We have our higher high, higher low, higher high, higher low, and then we had some funny action happening here where the floor used to be from I'm on ES. The floor used to be on ES from 53.31 to 49.60 until we finally broke out, made a high at 53.68. And then when we were having a little bit of that flash crash, what was it, 2 Fridays ago, where we came down towards 5,200, that was probably the worst of it. But we failed to come down to the previous higher low, creating a higher low here on the daily, as well as supporting a bounce off of the EMAs. The 50-day held up well, especially when we see prices above the 20-day exponential moving average. Most likely you may see a continuation in an uptrend. With that said, let me remove this floor that I have plotted because it does not matter anymore. It does not serve us. When we're analyzing, we want to look at the now. We want to look at the facts now. So, because we could not make a new low, we could not blow out these higher lows, the floor that I'm focusing on ES is from 5,200 towards the highs of 53.85. Now, I know there's two facts here, and those facts are, excuse me, above 53.85, most likely we're going to 5,400, and then we can continue targeting round numbers to the upside in 20-point increments. So 54.20, 54.40, maybe 54.50 as a psychological support resistance, but really above 5,400, I think my attention is going to turn to the big number of 5,500. But for now, that's just an estimate. It's up in the air because if we do come down to 5,200 again this week, and that could happen with one swing of CPI, if we do come down here and we break below, my automatic assumption is we're going to come down to the previous higher low at 50.35, and if we get below 50.35, eventually we might tumble down towards the floor of 49.60, and below 49.60 is definitely a green light to go short. I don't think that's going to be the route we're going to take. I think this goes higher. Again, this is a bull market. We're in a bull cycle. With that said, I now need to identify some probabilities here that may lean in my favor depending on direction, because again, the facts are either above 53.85 it's going higher, or below 5,200 we're going lower. Everything in between, that's tough. So we have to break down our probabilities. With that said, the 20-day exponential moving average for me is very important, and it just so happens to be around 5,300. Let's keep that in mind. So this is kind of the middle ground, assuming that if the daily candle closes below the 20-day of 5,300, we may see more downside stemming towards the lows of 5,200. Just an assumption. Okay, moving on to the 4-hour. And again, I want to look at what's going on in the now. Okay. So again, using the model of higher highs, higher lows, right? We made a high over here, then broke down the higher low, so created a lower low, lower high, lower low, lower high, lower low, lower high, lower low, until we ultimately started to retrace our moves back above the previous lower high. So this is the first one we blew out. This is the second one at 5,300. It was a little messy here. We were figuring things out, but when price showed us that we could get and hold above 5,300, That gave us the green light to come up towards 53.38, which was the breakout I should have sent as a signal. But with that said, above 53.38, we came back up to the highs of 53.68, made new highs of 53.85. Notice they're in roughly about 20-point increment distance. So the assumption is if and when we get above 53.85, that just solidifies this idea I have of targeting 5400 to the upside. Okay, what are the facts here? Again, we made a higher high, higher low, higher high, higher low. Okay, so we just identified another floor, another two floors here in between this range ultimately. The other thing is on the 4 hour, yes, the 20-day is important, but not as important as the one on the daily, because how can you trust some intraday moves from the 20 if we're so easily able to break below it, touch up on the 50, touch up on the 100, 200 just to bounce? Can't necessarily trust it. We can use it as an idea of what might happen. Remember, indicators are lagging. So it's always price action first, and then we apply the indicators. With that said, I need to identify this floor here, which on the intraday is telling me below 53.28, we may or may not come down towards 5300. And then the assumption is if the daily closes below 5300, we're going to continue stemming towards 5260, 5240, 45, all the way down to the base floor of 5200. Now, for a fact, if and when we are below 5200, that's going to stem us down towards 51.89, which was an interesting higher low from last week that we actually managed to bounce right off of. Had we broke below 51.89, that would have gave us the spill down towards 51.55. Then we're coming down towards 5100. Below that, we're looking at the support of 50.36. With that said, again, this is up in the air. Until that happens, we need to break below 53.28, which is the level floor here we have, or above 53.85. Again, we can go long. I don't necessarily feel the need to break this down to the 1 hour because I've identified what really is going to confirm what's going to happen. And again, the assumption is because this would be our second higher low on the intraday on the 4 hour, magically, well, not magically, ironically, it's 5300. And again, 5300 was the daily day 20 EMA. We get a close below that on the daily, we're most likely going to spill to the downside of this range. But again, the facts are we're looking for the facts. Facts are either 5385 breaks and we're going to go higher, 5400 is that target, or below 5200 and we continue spilling, and possibly it's going to be a short-term trend reversal to the downside. In order for all of this to be invalidated, we need to break below the two previous higher lows to confirm that this would be a bear trend. In that case, below 50.35, we break below that, okay, we can maybe start putting on our bear hat. But everything here in between, I think, is a buying opportunity. With that said, there's going to be a lot of patience. I'm not too eager to execute specifically anything here in between, but we'll see as price goes. We'll see what happens with the market and where we go from there. With that said, let's move on to NQ. Now, ES, we're keeping it simple again. I Let me break this down to the 1 hour just to go over it. What is it really showing me here? Nothing. This is just the floor. We're really in between 53.28 and 53.85. Everything here, again, I'm guessing. I don't want to guess. And the safer short, just let me reiterate, the safer short, the one that confirms that you can take that chance to go lower, is specifically below 5300 on the daily. If we can't close below 5300 on the daily, there is a higher chance that in this range price is going to get bought back up. All right, with that said, let's move on to NQ. Okay, so same thing. Let's clear this up. All right, so are we on the daily? Let's pull it up to the 2-year. All right. Again, this is pretty bullish. So the facts are this is an uptrend. This is bullish. We're going higher. Buy the dip. Higher high, higher low. Higher high, higher low. Higher high. Well, this was the last higher high, and then we made a higher low here. We made a new high here. Similarly, with ES, used to be the floor of 17,113 and 18,708. Got a break above that, created a new floor. We have to focus now on the current. We've identified the fact is we're making higher highs and higher lows, so we are trending higher. Cool. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and plot off my resistance at the all-time highs, and then I'm going to plot off the support where we wicked of 18,250. Wonderful. So I know the facts. The facts are above 19,155. We're probably going to use round number theory towards 19,002, 19,250. And really what I ideally like to target on NQ, and I think it's very possible with two good pushes on good news and with volume, is 19,500. I think that's going to be the next big target for NQ. And for ES, it's definitely going to be probably, I want to say 5450, the middle ground between 5400 and 5500 in terms of upside. But again, we can't call it quite yet. Monday's going to be a dead day. Tuesday's when all the fun starts with CPI. With that in mind, let's use some of the context clues we have up. So on the daily, I have my 20 EMA at 18,718. Okay, very interesting. Very interesting because if you remember last week, we were calling out a few levels to the downside that might serve us of interest. Maybe if we were to pull back to retest them, maybe we pick up some orders. We'll see. I'm just putting this out that this is kind of going to be the middle ground of whether we're going to continue lower to the downside of the channel or we prop up against the support and we get bought back up. We break out above the highs and we keep it pushing. Okay, everything we needed to identify in the daily is done. Let's move on to the 4-hour. Okay. Same thing. We broke above lower high 1, lower high 2, trend reversal. I really wish I had the shot to execute on this 18,785 breakout last week, but that's okay. With that said, we'll get ours. But we retraced all the previous lower highs again and started to make higher highs, higher lows. So now looking at this a little bit closer, let's draw out the floor that we are currently in between on the intraday. One second, I have OCD. I gotta make it to the top. Okay, so we are really in between 18,940 and 19,155. So again, this kind of helps me get an idea that if and when we break below 18,940, there's a really good chance that we're gonna come up on 18,700 or maybe the supports right here over at 18,750. Interesting that this is the next area of a higher low, similar to where our 20-day EMA was on the daily, and that's important. If we get that close below the daily, let me pull this up on the daily. If we get this close below the 20-day on the daily, again, most likely we're going to come down to the bottom end of the range, but it does not confirm that we're just going to flush out of here. We need confirmations. With that said, on the intraday, yes, in theory, we would have broken one higher low, two higher low, and then ultimately spilling over to the third one confirms we have more downside, but it's short term. Remember, when we zoom it out and look on the daily, what is the daily telling me? So the daily is telling me that this is a higher high and this is a higher low. The next higher high and higher low are these areas right here. This one is a higher high and this is a higher low. Fundamentally, to confirm a trend reversal, for you to have a definite confirmation that, okay, we're about to go lower, you need price to break below the second higher low when price is trending higher. In this case, this would be the first higher low and this would be your second higher low. So we are ways away from calling out any flush, any bear trend, or any bear market. Not in the slightest. At worst, maybe we come down to test out these supports. And on the intraday, I understand how some can get spooked with certain swings, but it is the daily that tells us what we are doing, where we are going, and why. With that said, again, if we break this smaller time frame 18,940 support, the assumption is we have room to come down to 18,732. But mind you, as long as we are in the floor of 18,250 and 19,155, this is chop. We need to get above 19,155 to go higher, or price needs to break below 18,250 to go lower. Everything in between, we're just identifying floors and using intraday higher highs, higher lows, or lower highs and lower lows to confirm short-term movement. Okay, so with that said, until we get a break of either or, I'm not touching this. We can't really do anything here because it comes down to guessing. I can break this down to the 1 hour, but again, I don't really need to because I've already identified everything to the fact of it as much as I could on the daily on the 4 hour. If I break this down on the 1 hour, again, it does not tell me anything that I don't know already. If anything, the fast movements on the smaller time frames might incentivize me to act more, but you cannot deny the facts. With a market, it's either up or down. And if it's going sideways, you're not making money. Again, you could scalp, you could. I don't recommend it. We could break this down, for example, even on the 15-minute. No, it's not good enough. Let's put it on the 5-minute, maybe. It's not good enough either. Okay, so this is some real degen type of outlook on it. This is a lower high. This is a lower high. Get us above the second lower high. Short term, you can have a trend reversal where price may attempt to go for the next lower high, in this case 1992. Break below the first higher low, break below the second higher low. The assumption is, let's see, how much lower can we really go? Break below the second higher low. Okay, so what? You're probably might come down to 18,950, 18,940, maybe. Keep in mind why I also avoid this. If I do that and I'm going on chance, let's say I break above 19,073, my first target is 20 points above, where am I going to put my stop? A reasonable stop, one where it won't wick me out in one swing. And that's the problem. That's why I tend to stick to the higher time frames. That's why, if I identify the floors in between where price action is at, it's a matter of either are we breaking out or are we breaking down? With that said, I hope you guys have a solid trading week ahead. We'll see what we get. CPI is going to be the big day for us, and we'll go from there. Cheers.